like a quick little rundown because you're the first people outside of my circle of friends to see these photos. Because I went to this convention in Pittsburgh back in December, the first weekend in December. It was like right after Thanksgiving. I go to do this 18+ anime con, get my ass kicked up one side of the street and down the other, and then immediately after the convention I leave to go to Japan. And I stay in Kawasaki, and Kawasaki is known for beer, it's known for karaoke, it's known for an interesting underground LGBT population, and it's known for this movie theater. And all it is a fancy movie theater that looks like it came out of Italy. But the fun fact about this theater is it's super cheap and they sell beer at it. So I go to see Lupin the First. By the way, Lupin the First, the CGI one they just put out, it's DreamWorks quality, if not better. It is that good. After I watched it for a full 4 days, all I was doing was humming the Lupin theme and screaming "Lupin" at my friend whenever he would walk out of his hotel room, because it's so good. But they light it up for the holidays, and of course I don't know why, but Ashita no Joe was in the subway, and we went to Tokyo Skytree across from the capsule store because I have an obsession with gachapon. And Tokyo Skytree is actually pretty cool because they really do it up for Christmas, and you are at one of the highest points in the city. So while you're up there, you're seeing, oh, there's my friend Isaiah. He actually paid for my entire trip to Japan. He paid for my flight and everything because he didn't want to go by himself. So that officially means I'm open for tours. So we went up to Tokyo Skytree and took all of these beautiful photos of the city. From what I love is, do you see the size of the shadow that's being cast by Skytree on the ground? I was horrified by that because this is taller than anything else in the city. And it's got this beautiful Christmas thing going on. Oh, you can get yourself some Christmas ice cream. That's Christmas green tea ice cream, that's regular ice cream. And it's just a gorgeous little place to kill some time. You get to go all the way up to the top. If you pay the extra 1,000 yen, you go to you go as high as they'll let you go as a person. And then you can just stand there and be that selfie guy taking photos of the city far below, knowing that if you fell through the ground, you would die. You would die before you hit the ground. So we went to Tokyo Skytree. Oh, and where's the glass floor? Where's the glass floor? There's the glass floor.
Yeah.
Now, the fun part is, there's 2 of them. So if you're the dumbass that does Gangnam Style on it, you fall through, there's a second one to catch you. I would know because I'm the dumbass who did Gangnam Style. So it was actually pretty cool just getting up there. So look, it's Kentucky Fried Colonel. For those of you that don't know, Japan they really love KFC at Christmas. It's been a tradition since the 70s. And while I was there, I did have my KFC. Unfortunately, I couldn't get Christmas KFC because you gotta order that 3 months in advance. But I did say hi to the Colonel. So we wandered all the way to Asakusa, found this weird little boat, like, don't know what it is, but it was there. That is the Asahi Beer Brewery. It's in the middle of the city and it has a torch on top of it. I'm not complaining. Went to Asakusa to go visit Sensoji, ran around, took my Buddha selfies, and I had my first takoyaki of the trip. And I had a bottle of hoppy. Hoppy is non-alcoholic beer. I say this because most non-alcoholic beer is like 0.5. This is like 1.5. So this is definitely not non-alcoholic beer, but you can buy it in a vending machine. So I take my friend to Akihabara because he had to see Akihabara, and I ordered this out of a vending machine expecting it to be coffee. It was in fact soup.
There's soup on the bottle.
It's soup in a can. There's no clothes, only soup. So one of the eyeglass places was doing a Gundam promotion. I was gonna buy the Char Aznable glasses, but they couldn't get my prescription right. And I wasn't paying like $100 for a new eye exam just to get Char Aznable glasses, but I did take a photo of the Gundam. Oh, this is actually in the airport. I don't know why it got coded for this day, but this is actually in the airport. They will tell you where to go because they know you're a weeb. So that was for Kit, because that's one of the patron kami of America. He's all about fighting. So we went over to Odaiba just to see the Gundam. And at some point over the weekend, if you find me, I'll show you the Gundam video, because they projected a 40th anniversary video on the mall. International model painting competition. 1, 2, 3, 4, all over Gundam base, and they were letting you take photos of it. So then we went out for okonomiyaki, and I love okonomiyaki, and apparently sausages, those are just hot dogs. But this one place is called Tanto. It's in Kawasaki City. The food there is fantastic. A little expensive, but totally worth it. And if you are a gaijin, oh my God, will they make fun of you. But they'll make fun of you in the best possible way by dragging you after you eat your monjaku to this place, the old rock and roll bar, Shaboom Shaboom, where you will get so drunk but the owner is friends with a lot of mangaka and anime artists. So while you're in there, you will get to see his book of sketches that were done by the actual artists that were done for him. So, little side Inari Shrine. This is also where you're gonna wanna go. This is Nakano Broadway. You're gonna wanna go there to spend all your money because it's a lot cheaper than Akiba. While I was there, I managed to get, I saw, who has seen Hozuki's Cool-Headedness? King of the Hell. It's a really great show about this Oni who works for Enma, and he sells damnation and damnation accessories, I tell you what. And that's the best way of describing it. It's King of the Hill in the Japanese afterlife. And I love this show, and I see these two sketches from the production in the window of one of the Mandarake stores in Nakano Broadway. And I'm like, oh my God, I want a Hozuki production sketch. How much are these? 3,000 yen. It's like 28 bucks. I'll buy these. I wasn't buying two, I was buying a set of 7. I didn't realize that the 3,000 yen was for the entire top shelf. So I walked out of there with 7 production sketches from Hozuki that now I'm trying to decide what to do with. I think I'm gonna give one of them to one of my friends. So, gotta catch them all, baby. This is Mr. Donut's Christmas promotion, where you in fact can eat a Pokeball. I love Mr. Donut. And then I went to McDonald's where I got my shrimp fillet, and this is so you know how we have the McRib? Japan has the Grakoro burger. That patty contains white sauce, noodles, a little bit of pork, and is deep fried as a croquette, covered in a beef demi-glaze and cheese. It tastes really good until you swallow it. Then you get an aftertaste of something. And then you don't want to eat it anymore. But that's where I'm gonna stop because it's panel time. And if you want to see more, I'll throw some more up before the punk panel tomorrow. Also, if you're going to KatsuCon, you'll see the whole thing at KatsuCon. I'm gonna show my entire trip while I'm at KatsuCon just because I can. But you know what I should do before I leave? I should probably check the sound because the punk panel had no sound last night. Nope, we're good. I want to make sure because I actually have like a video or two in here. So, I got a question for fellows in the room. What's your first anime? First one you ever watched? Consciously, unconsciously?
Dragon Ball.
Dragon Ball. What's yours?
Akira.
Akira. Good one to start on. What's yours?
Inuyasha.
Oh, another great one to start on. My first anime that I consciously watched was Dragon Ball Z. Because I used to play cards, and one day the Dragon Ball Z expansion came out for this old card game called Animehem. It was back in like 1998. And I freaked out for Dragon Ball. I got really obsessed with it. And I noticed that when a lot of people get involved in anime, they have their starting point where they got really interested in the medium, and then they look at everything that came after it. Occasionally they'll go back and look at what came before. But you have that fixed point of where you got into anime and how you got into anime, framing what you know and understand about it. And one thing I've noticed about this is when you start talking to people about anime, they come up with a lot of these really interesting comments or these really interesting observations about them. And the more you talk to people, the more you realize that a lot of people, one, don't understand the history of the medium as a whole, and two, tend to like to compare it to weird stuff, which ultimately leads to some clueless American deciding, I want to make my own anime. I'm just gonna do something real quick. I want to just change my my displays for a second, only because, no, not system preferences, you slag. Screw it, I know what I'm doing. But when it comes to anime, there's an enormous amount that goes into the medium as a whole that often gets overlooked. And a lot of that comes down to the notion that when you ask people of a certain age or people of a certain knowledge level, what is anime? You'll get answers like cheap Chinese cartoons, which is the worst thing I've ever heard because you can't even get the country right. I've heard people call it a copy, I've heard people call it an emulation, I've heard people call it all kinds of horrible misnomers. And the thing that needs to be remembered about anime as a whole, as a medium, is for as long as there has been animation, there has been anime. For as long as there has been visual records of media in the Western world, Japan has been contributing to it. Anime is the way that we see it now, but it belies a much larger legacy. These are the 4 shows that came out in 1963, the first year that animation hit television in Japan. And for a lot of people, that is where anime, quote unquote, starts. But the Japanese animation legacy goes back a lot further than that, all the way back to the Meiji era when the country was opened. And during the Meiji era, Japan was being exposed to technology that they'd never seen before, or in some cases was willfully kept out by the Tokugawa shogunate. Japan was being exposed to new advances in visual media, being exposed to new advances in science, being exposed to new advances in technology, and Japan very much loved this. They loved this so much that they started copying it. How many people here have ever heard the term Orientalism? Wherein Westerners looked at kimonos, dressed up in kimonos, and said, I want to be Japanese too, so I'm going to move to Japan, marry the daughter of a samurai, change my name to Koizumi Yakumo, and thereby become the first weeaboo. That's an actual person I'm talking about. We know him as Lafcadio Hearn. But while we were busy doing that to Japan, Japan was looking at us and doing exactly the same thing. They called this Seiyo. And Seiyo's entire idea was, get what we can from the West, incorporate it into our technology, and become like the West. Overnight, you start seeing all kinds of Western cultural things popping up in Japan. And when I say overnight, I literally mean the historical definition of overnight within a few months. You start seeing people using Western-style nobility titles, they start wearing Western-style clothes, they start incorporating Western-style tactics and Western-style language, and a lot of it blended together with nationalism. But out of this entire spate of trading culture back and forth comes a love of photography. Japan loves photos. The moment the French started realizing that we could in fact incorporate still images onto a brick plate to show to other people, Japan said, we can do that. And they started doing it almost immediately. These here are images of life in early Meiji, late Tokugawa Japan. These are actors that were paid by the government to essentially cosplay. So these were the first cosplay idols. And these photos were kept there as records. Japan likes visual record keeping. They like visual media. They use it as a way of keeping track of what they had before and after. They use it as a way of keeping track of their natural splendor. And they use this as a way to create a new visual record, harnessing Western technology, improving upon it where they could, and creating something new. And they've been doing this as far back as the Edo period, when the Portuguese and the Dutch gave them these lanterns. They decided to steal the lanterns and create early anime back in like the 18th century, 17th century. But the only reason I bring this up is because when it comes to talking about anime, a lot of definitions and a lot of people's discussions and value talks tend to overlook those concepts. They tend to overlook the rich history that Japan has with incorporating different visual mediums into its own storytelling and into its own narratives. So then it just comes down to this massive question then. Before we can talk about American anime, maybe we should try to define anime. I mean, what is anime?
What is anime? Anime is action, sci-fi, comedy, martial arts. Anime is straight from Japan, totally unexpected, not kid stuff. Anime is on right now, 24 hours a day. Log on now and demand your Anime Network.
I don't know how many people remember that, but there was a time when you could not put on a VHS tape without getting that. Reminding you that anime is not kid stuff, it's straight from Japan, it's all of this cool nonsense, and you really want your anime, because anime is something else. And then of course you had this. I love this because he has no right to talk. He worked on one of the original television anime. He was inspired to be a freaking animator by basically having the first waifu. But you see this kind of divide here. Anime, for some reason, has always been seen as somehow special or different. Do you know what the basic definition of anime is if you ask someone in Japan? An easier way to say animation. You talk to animators in Japan, anime is a marketing term. They just use it because saying animation is hard. Saying anime is easy. And over time, that is how it started out. But when you start talking about anime in the West, well, we have to make everything complicated. So I like this particular one. I asked a bunch of people for their definitions of what anime is, and I got a lot of really great little bits about it. Animation created by and for Japanese audiences is probably the baseline way of looking at what anime is. Because prior to now, and when I say now, I mean now, they didn't care about what Western audiences wanted to see. They were making it for their own television. They were making anime for their own audiences. And even today, they very rarely take into account, is this going to go overseas or not? Kid? But this led to some really interesting little conundrums over time. Like, one of the first anime that I know was designed specifically for Western audiences was Space Dandy. When Watanabe started working on it, he saw how popular Cowboy Bebop was, so he decided to give us essentially the unofficial sequel to Cowboy Bebop. Who here watched it? That is the reason why Japan doesn't care. They don't care because whenever they try to gear something to a Western audience, no one watches it. But then you have these wonderful little miracles. Shows that no one in Japan liked, that were licensed to Western TV, were mega hits in America, and then Japan found out about it and said, case in point, Excel Saga. Nobody in Japan remembers Excel Saga. It did not do well when it aired in Japan. It did really well when it aired here. Outlaw Star. From the formative years of Toonami, a lot of people remember Outlaw Star fondly in America. No one in Japan remembers it existed. Or perhaps the big one, Cowboy Bebop. If you say Cowboy Bebop to a Western anime fan, they're either going to go, what? At which point you know they were born after 2005. No offense to anyone born after 2005. Or they're going to go, oh my God, that was the greatest thing ever. But in Japan, nobody cared until the West started saying, hey, this is a really great show. And then they gave us a movie that sucked. And then they gave us Space Dandy that nobody watched, and then they're not going to do that again. But initially, animation by and for Japanese audiences is what it was. Whatever we got, we either got because A, it was so popular that they had to give it to us or someone was going to steal it, like Dragon Ball or Pokemon, or B, was so cheap that we bought the footage for pennies on the dollar, and we were able to create our own marketing for it. So this is the old definition that was valid, I guess, up until the middle of the early aughts. This is a major one. A medium treated like a genre. Anime is not a genre. It's just like Usher is not a genre of music. Anime is not a genre of storytelling. It is a way of telling stories that involves storyboard art, frame dynamics with specific visual shooting techniques, audio cues, and story pacing. Anime all has these beats, but the genres are still there. Sci-fi anime is still sci-fi, fantasy anime is still fantasy, hentai is a mess. But those are genres. Anime is a medium, but it's a medium that gets treated like a genre. I like when I walk into Best Buy, because I still do. I bought a new phone last week, and I walked into Best Buy, and they have an anime section. And in their anime section, they have Sailor Moon, they have Hellsing Ultimate, they have My Hero Academia, they have April in the Imaginary World? That's French, but it's foreign and it's a cartoon, so it goes in the anime section. We'll get to that a little bit later on. Now, this is where things are starting to get interesting, because now you're starting to see this idea of the Japanese way of telling stories. And there is a different way that anime often structures stories than Western ones. Western stories are often good versus evil, light versus dark. The pure hero faces the vile, destructive beast. They fight, the hero wins, gets the princess, rides off into the sunset. The Hollywood movie will be made with Tom Cruise in it. That's the Western way of telling a story. In the Japanese version of telling the story, the devil gets punched in the face so he works at a fast food restaurant. In the Japanese way of telling a story, we win, but at such a great cost that we question, is it worth it? There's a lot of fatalism, there's a lot of shades of gray, there's a lot of moral ambiguity, a lot of anime, especially if you watch Akira. Akira is a great example of this. No one comes out of that looking good, because Japanese stories are told differently. It isn't good versus evil. It's often trying to find that balance within yourself that can be reflected as you've grown. They're growth stories. And you're starting to see Western creators take that tack and incorporate it into their own animation. But that Japanese way of telling stories is often what made early anime so compelling, especially when you were raised on a diet of G.I. Joe, where I don't care anymore. I like that one, an appropriate mess of global proportions, because at this point, who knows what anime is becoming? You're seeing anime that isn't even from Japan, but was created by Japanese expatriates. You're seeing anime that has a Japanese creator, but the entire thing was done by some poor schmuck in a Korean warehouse. You're seeing anime created by the Chinese, You're seeing anime created by the Germans. You're seeing anime that no longer falls into the old constraints. But the fun part about that means that we have grown to the point where we have a global enough society where we can continue to learn and grow off of it. Now, I like this particular quote from the book Frames of Anime because this is kind of important. A well-established pattern of complicity between Orientalism and Auto-Orientalism. And the best way I have of saying that is, hey Jen, the Japanese know what we want, so they give it to us. And over time, this has led to people thinking that the Japanese have no sense of self, they have no sense of culture, they have no sense of identity. Oh no, they do. They totally do. They just don't tell us. You come to Japan, oh, you want to see samurai? Here's the samurai. You come to Japan, you want anime? There's Akiba. Leave all your money at the train station. Oh, you come to Japan, you want Japanese food? Here's one of 17 food courts. Let us go about our business. And this has become an actual way of doing things, to the point where if you go off the beaten path and go to find other Japanese and say, oh, I have interest in Japanese culture, they're genuinely shocked. Because they're expecting one thing from America, America is expecting one thing from Japan, and it kind of just clicked into something else. Not because the Japanese don't know what's going on, but because they honestly have more important things to worry about. So they give us what we want, and that's that. But you know what? That's not exclusive to Japan. The Amish do it. Or personal, I'm from New York. When I see tourists, I tell them to F off. I will offer to mug them if they want. And I will tell them the wrong subway directions to get somewhere. Because they're expecting me to do it, I'm gonna give them what they ask for. But this is relative to almost every other culture. Now, I like this one here because this is like a cardinal. Kid and I belong to a couple of Shinto mailing lists online. And you can find, you know, the people who are genuinely interested in the practice versus the weeaboo who discovered what Shinto was through watching anime, then gets that sense of smug self-superiority because he knows something about it. And this became a thing. For a lot of people, anime was the first time they were exposed to a non-Western point of view, a non-Western way of telling stories. And for some people, it was compelling and it was different. For some people, it's like, I want to learn more about this Inari fellow. Who is this Inari fellow? What do you mean they don't know? And it really flavored how we started to perceive things and we started to devour things. I love yokai. I am obsessed with yokai. And the only reason I know what yokai is because I played Pokemon. But it's a way of exposing yourself up to a new world that you never saw before. Now, this is from Zach Davison, translator for Drawn and Quarterly, friend and drinking buddy of mine. And I love this particular quote because of two lines. One, shoehorning an entire country's industry into the limited genre of anime does it a disservice that doesn't offer the multitude of art styles, etc. And in the US, anime is a marketing term that defines what shelf to file a movie on, has no meaning beyond that. That might be the bitter old man definition, but it does make sense. Anime was always special because it was different. Anime was always special because it was exotic. Anime was always special because it was something else. And that stuck. And because it stuck, that's how we tend to perceive things. Now, I love that we live in a world when there is a new generation of anime fans where that is not a thing, where they grew up with so much of it around them that they don't see it as anything different. That is a sign that globalism actually can work. Now, if you want to talk about an actual definition of anime, this is the closest thing you're going to find. Anime as a medium and an art style did differentiate from Western animation at first. And it did it at first because of one thing, cost. Animation is expensive. It was especially expensive in the 50s and 60s when big budget films could cost you the equivalent of hundreds of millions of dollars. And if you were working on this by yourself or you were working on this with a small team, you had to find a way to cut costs. And how many people here know Osamu Tezuka? Osamu Tezuka is called the godfather of anime because he created the first television anime aired in Japan, Astro Boy. And when he worked on Astro Boy, it was literally him and 4 other guys. And they had to find a way to create a moving image with a small budget and very few people. And they created the limited frame template. Now, if you want to know more about the limited frame template, Frederick Schott's book, The Astro Boy Essays, goes into great depth on Tezuka's mindset. And I highly recommend you pick that up and give that a read. What the limited frame template pretty much says is, you cut down the number of frames per drawing to the point where it's barely moving, but moving enough that you think it's moving. You do single shots, focus on faces, because you can erase a face and redraw it without redrawing a whole body. This way, you can make the thing move at a very quick pace. Zoom and slide to make you think something is moving. That doesn't mean it is, it just means that you think it is. Early anime was simply trying to find a way to get a manga page to move. And if it moved a little bit, then you know that it worked. You do your stock footage. Why does every Magical Girl anime have a 2-minute transformation sequence? That's 2 minutes you don't have to animate. And that adds up over time. animate single body parts, bank the footage, and use short takes. In the end, what you got was something choppy, what you got was something very limited, but it moved and it worked. No one expected Astro Boy to work. No one even knew if there was a market for it. And by the end of the summer in 1963, it had gone global. The world had seen it. So here's another fun fact that you can take to the bank. Anime has been a thing. What we consider to be anime has been a thing in America for just as long as it's been a thing in Japan. Astro Boy was January 1963. We got it in August. And we've been airing it ever since. In fact, that cute little intro about Here He Comes Astro Boy, that cute little song that everyone knows, that was American. We put that in the American version of the intro. We sent that back to Japan. Tezuka's like, why didn't we think of this? And it went into the Japanese opening. Now, when it comes to old animation though, Japan has been doing this for as long as the rest of the world. This is from 1907, Katsudo Shashin. And it is a very, very quick graphic of literally a guy writing Katsudo Shashin on a chalkboard. That's the oldest animation that we can verify Japan has ever done. Right there, that little clip. By 1917, they had done a feature. This is 3 years after Gertie the dinosaur stomped onto screen, ate a tree, went raw, and walked away. Japan produced this. And I won't spend any time talking about how grossly orientalist it is or how really grotesque this thing works within the confines of what we know about animation. I'm just going to show that this is in fact a thing, and it's been around for 103 years. And in 103 years, you've seen how far animation has come. By 1931, this is the year my father was born, you have something that is almost indistinguishable from a Max Fleischer cartoon. But this is quintessentially Japanese. But if I were to turn off the sound, it doesn't look too different than what else was being done in the world at the time. Because at this point, everyone was sharing technology. Great Britain was sharing with Japan, France was sharing with America, America was sharing with Japan, Japan was sharing with Canada, everyone was sharing the technology. So there was no need to differentiate. It was just animation. This is also available on YouTube. Look up Fox vs. Possum, you'll find it.
おい、ツンデレ侍起きろ。
So, by 1958, they were aiming on Disney.
Many years ago,
This is the
there
movie that
raged
is
a
often
terrible
cited
storm.
as the first anime by other scholars, because
worst
this
that
was the
had ever
first
been
in an
known in
era
China.
of modern Japanese
The whole
animation.
country flooded.
But what Toei Doga was trying to
This
do
was
in
a
this
magic
movie
storm.
was essentially copy Disney.
Wondrous things to
And they did. To much of a
This is
degree,
the
they
magic
copied the
circle.
Disney aesthetic and created a Chinese
And the storm
folktale for the
transformed her
ages.
into a
Sitting in the back of the movie theater was a young Hayao Miyazaki. He saw her, he fell in love with her, and decided to become an animator.
smooth black hair.
So that's why I said he has no right to say anime was a mistake. He had the first waifu. I mean, she is a splendid waifu, but still. So this leads to the question of inspirations. And if you want to find more on the history of animation in Japan, come find me when I'm doing the first anime. I cover like 60 years of Japanese animation in 60 minutes. But when I'm talking about inspirations, I'm talking about things that are either inspired by anime or would go on to inspire anime. Because once the doors of culture trade are open, they do not close. And since ever, with the exception of that time between the 20s and 1945, and we all know what happened between the 20s and 1945, Japan pretty much had an open trade relation with the entire world. And they were getting stuff going back and forth like crazy. Music, fashion, you name it, they had it. So this inspiration does go two ways. So let's just look at some inspirations.
Case of Jay versus Dante Hicks, we find in favor of...
We're sorry. Due to circumstances beyond our control, the script to the rest of the episode was lost on its way overseas. Luckily, the episode was finished by the Korean animators. We hope you enjoy the new ending.
We find in favor of...
Big American Party! Yay! Everybody, disco
Now, for those of you that are not aware of what this is the Clerks
animated
animated series. This is the second episode ending where they were blatantly making fun of the anime craze at the time, which I found really funny because the same Korean animation studio that animated this was animating Japanese shows at exactly the same time.
Oh my God, Bear's driving. How can that be? Car full of midgets. Korean animation studio. Everybody work. Everybody work. Everybody work. He big mean man whip us. We are slaves. Here we are. Help us. We will stop. There's no escape this time. No, it is you who will be the one escaping. Not Pikachu. Please don't sue. Ha ha ha. Axel Foley, Judge Reinhold.
Oh no, just wait.
Tom Cruise. Oh,
Tom
no.
Cruise.
You want the truth? You can't handle the truth. Show me the money.
I don't think you understand how big a deal Tom Cruise is in Japan, in Asia. He is probably more famous there than he is here. They absolutely love him, they love Matt Damon, and they love Arnold Schwarzenegger. And I only know this because when I was in Japan last month, there was an Arnold Schwarzenegger film festival going on at the Toho Cinema in Kawasaki. Every show was sold out, even for Commando. So they... Even Jingle All the Way. Okay, Japan loves Christmas. Fun fact, Osaka loves it more than Tokyo. So let's just get started with Blade Runner. Blade Runner is a great way of looking at how it goes both ways. When Blade Runner came out, this was something new, this was something edgy. It was a Japanese neo-noir sci-fi piece that was topical at the time, born out of Ridley Scott's intense hard-on for Japanese culture. But there's a thing about this particular movie. I mean, who has seen Blade Runner? Good, most of you have seen it. For those of you that haven't, why? It's not hard to find. Just don't watch Blade Runner 2049.
Oh, I like that.
It's too long. It's like 2 hours too long. But the thing about Blade Runner is this quote. Blade Runner was definitely the movie that influenced me the most as an anime director. That is Shinichiro Watanabe, creator of Cowboy Bebop. He watched Blade Runner and he said, I love this. And there's a lot of Blade Runner going into his work, especially if you watch things like Space Dandy and Cowboy Bebop. Japanese directors were watching this and going, oh my God, this is amazing as well. So over time, you start to see the lines blur. I remember when I was in college, and I was in college at the turn of the millennium, and we had an anime club, and our anime club had like 30 members in it, and we used to organize these monthly screenings of things. And like, we would show My Neighbor Totoro, and we get the anime club. We would show like a Kurosawa movie, and we get the anime club. And then one day, we go to do this, and we book a room for like 50 people because we never have more than 30 show up. And there's a line of like 150 people outside the room wanting to see Ghost in the Shell. And we're like, why? Oh, we all saw The Matrix and wanted to know why the Wachowskis keep talking about this anime crap. People don't realize it now in an era where The Matrix is essentially a punchline, but when this came out, the fact that the Wachowskis were talking about Ghost in the Shell, that they were talking about Akira, that they were talking about Japanese cyberpunk anime was a watershed moment for the fandom. Things we take for granted now started because Keanu Reeves decided to not act his way through a movie. I love the man now. Can we get John Wick in The Matrix? I want to see that. That is the greatest fanfic ever written. Somebody write it. But The Matrix was a major watershed moment for this because it exposed audiences to something they had never seen before. Something inspired by anime got anime fans to take notice. So of course it leads to questions about making American remakes of things, and people were like, when are they gonna make Akira? Well, apparently Taika Waititi is gonna try. I love Taika Waititi. Taika Waititi has done 3 of my favorite movies: Thor Ragnarok, What We Do in Shadows, and Jojo Rabbit. And if you haven't seen Jojo Rabbit, it's the funniest thing. It's the darkest of dark comedies with the cutest little British boy in it. But people talk about these remakes in late aughts. Josh Trank and Max Landis, who are now trash people we don't talk about, turned out their own version of Akira. But this is an American homage to Akira. Instead of copying the anime, they took the beats of the downtrodden person obtaining godlike power, using that godlike power to change the world and ultimately being destroyed by it, and they keyed it into the 2008 economic recession, something that a Western audience would understand. Rather than remake it, they adapted it for America, and it worked. The scene where he's in a hospital gown destroying downtown Seattle, they openly said, we just took that directly from Akira because we love that movie. So of course now we have giant robot punch monster in face, and its sequel, the weirdest episode of It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia I've ever seen, Charlie Causes the Apocalypse. So then of course that leads to the question of, is it possible to start seeing Japanese-style narratives pop up in Western media? And I'm going to start saying, yeah, you're starting to see it now because of films like this. Who here saw Kubo and the Two Strings? The very fact that it starts with, this is the story of you, don't blink and you'll miss it, and it talks about heritage and finding your home, set against the backdrop of an ancestor, of the Obon Festival, where we're remembering our ancestors, breaking into the Japanese folklore that defines the nation's national identity and national myth. And yet this was done by Westerners. It's a beautiful piece that is a Japanese-style narrative. I have friends in Japan who, when they watched this, said, are you sure this is white guys? Yeah, these are gaijin. But it's so, I know. And it's a great way of explaining how these things have started to change. I mean, of course. Now, people have said to me, is Steven Universe like an American anime? No, it's not. Rebecca Sugar does not want to make an anime. Rebecca Sugar wants to make the greatest JRPG you've ever played. And in the process of making the greatest JRPG you've ever played, she came across a way to incorporate her love of anime, video games, Japanese pop culture, and fairy tales into Steven Universe. And in the early seasons, they were blink and you miss it moments where you saw something from an anime. And by the end, you have Captain Larslock flying around the galaxy. I absolutely love how she has incorporated this in there, because this is a new generation of creators who are raised on anime and anime storytelling values that are incorporating it into their productions now. Again, no. So let's just jump onto the adaptations, because inspired is one thing. To blatantly remake something, you gotta have some balls. No. Okay, you will get the following concessions about Japanese Death Note. Concession number 1, Lakeith Stanfield. He is a perfect L. I would love to see him and Kenichi Matsuyama tag team the role in a joint production. Don't say anything, kid. Number 2, the kill sequence is phenomenal. But I knew the kill sequence was going to be phenomenal because we created a franchise of movies that was nothing but an extended kill sequence. There are, 8 Final Destination movies? And all of them are just people dying. Japanese, I'm going to take a potato chip and eat it while I write something down. America, I believe that death hurt. And number 3, the music. I have seen the album. When this came out, my girlfriend was watching it. I was at Wizard World, Chicago, and she's like, we have to watch Death Note. We have to watch Death Note. There's no way, of course, on heaven or earth is gonna make me watch Death Note. But the music is so good. Yeah, I know the music is good. Who here saw when they overdubbed the Japanese live action and used nothing but Red Hot Chili Pepper songs? We know how to put music in movies. We're very good at it, so of course it's gonna have a really great soundtrack. The rest of the movie can die on a fire. Now, Voltron, I used to be one of those weirdos who said Voltron sucked because it wasn't Go Lion. Then I watched Go Lion. Go Lion is terrible. Go Lion doesn't work because it has no plot. Voltron actually, even though they sanitized it and rewrote a lot of the script and added whole characters to it, it still worked because it was a Western style take using Japanese animated footage. The Japanese liked it too. In fact, in Japan, they called the Voltron from Netflix Go Lion Reborn, because it's 2 adaptations of a Japanese media where we actually did something right. Yeah, we sanitized out all the death and destruction, we removed all the fatalism that Japan is famous for, but we gave it a meta plot that made sense. And the meta plot is what carried the show on so fondly. This is actually the first anime I ever watched, and I didn't even realize I was watching it. And then one day the lions turned into cars, and I said, what the hell is this nonsense? So remember how I said Eastern and Western stories can have their own way of doing things? This is the way I look at it. All you need is kill, or as we know it in America, Edge of Tomorrow, the story. Soldier dies, comes back to life, dies, comes back to life, continues to come back to life, getting slightly more competent each time until he defeats Alien Menace. That's the plot of both movies. Hollywood version. Tom Cruise gets knocked down a peg by being forced to wallow in the mud, dies a bunch of times, discovers how to kill the aliens, goes back in time to fall in love with Emily Blunt, curtain close, everyone's happy. Japanese version. Kid enlists in the military because that's what you do, doesn't really know much about his own life, just that he has to do this, discovers that he now has the ability to come back, regenerate over and over and over again, discovers that he has to kill the only other person on the planet who knows what this is like, because as long as one of them is still alive, the cycle will continue, kills her, and then feels sad about it later, but at least we have an ability to stop the aliens. One is fatal and dark, one is a Hollywood ending. One has hope, the other has a Hollywood ending. but it's two ways of telling the same story. Western stories on one side, Japanese on the other, but at least it worked. No, 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 no! Get out of my house! Exactly! I was at another wizard show, and I'm at the airport having a beer, and this guy sits down next to me, asks me what I'm drinking, buys me around, and it's Piccolo. And I look at him, and we're having this conversation about movies, and I looked at him, and I'm like, Dragon Ball? Really? And he's like, it was a paycheck. And that pretty much is the point of the movie. I like Justin Chatwin. I mean, don't get me wrong. I love Justin Chatwin, just not this. You want a live-action Dragon Ball movie? China did a good one. It's called Dragon Ball: The Magic Begins, and it's literally Peter Pan with Dragon Ball characters in it. I highly recommend you take a look at it if you can find it. I actually have it on DVD. I bought it at a Sam Goody in 2000. Yeah, that's going back a ways. That's probably older than some of the people in the room. So, again, flying back from Japan, I had the option between this and King Arthur. I chose King Arthur, whatever. Finally, I'm in Anime North 2 years ago, and Netflix Canada has this on it. And I decide I'm going to watch it. So 2 things. Number 1, I fell asleep in the middle of it like I do when I watch regular Ghost in the Shell. I'm not a huge fan of Ghost in the Shell. I'm just going to be the first to admit it. I don't like it. I don't know why I don't like it. I should. I just don't. And number 2, it is a very, very pretty movie. It's pretty to look at and pretty stupid nonetheless. A very bad adaptation of a classic manga. But that doesn't mean that you can't have a good one. Because on the way back from Japan, last week, I watched this. This was amazing. When I first saw the trailer for Alita and I saw those eyes, I just went, nope. And then I started seeing people writing about how it's an incredibly faithful adaptation of the manga. Rosa Salazar is an amazing Alita. You're gonna like the story. And then I realized something as I was watching it. Ghost in the Shell was made pretty much just to make some money, have a Western adaptation. Rosa Salazar loves playing Alita, and you can tell. She loves it so much that she makes the character even more likable. I don't think it would have worked with anyone other than her. It was directed by Robert Rodriguez, who is a weeb extraordinaire. The dude loves anime. He has gone on about how much he loves Ghost in the Shell and Ninja Scroll. Number 3, it was co-written by James Cameron. And for those of you that don't know this, James Cameron has been trying to make this movie since the 90s. When he couldn't get the rights in the 90s, he made the TV show Dark Angel. He has been obsessed with Alita for his entire professional career. And when he finally got the ability to make it, he loved working on it. And that's the thing that sets this apart from Ghost in the Shell. You can tell the people involved in this movie loved working on it. Well, maybe not Christoph Waltz. I don't get a good read on him, but he is German. The people working on this movie loved being in this movie, and it shows when you're watching it. If you have not seen Battle Angel, I highly recommend watching it. It is definitely worth the watch. I'm just gonna buy it the next time it's on sale on Blu-ray because I love this. Again, the Wachowskis don't always do great work. Even though they loved Astro Boy, this didn't need to be made. It was interesting, but You want a good Wachowski anime? Boom. And people who watch this are like, but Speed Racer, the cartoon, it's not like the cartoon. Just my response is always the same. Have you watched the cartoon lately? Yeah. It did not age well. This sure as hell did. We're like 12 years in, and this is still an amazing sci-fi cyberpunk heist. This is like Fast and Furious plus anime, which is again something I'd like to see. So, the Japanese version, bright light, monster comes at you, you die. That is a Japanese horror movie. American version, atmosphere, sound, lighting. When I watch Ringu, I'm like, okay, that is patently unfair. When I watched The Ring for the first time, I hid in a clothes dryer for 2 days. And then I unplugged every television in my house. Because we know how to build atmosphere. If there's one flaw to Japanese horror, they don't understand atmosphere. We do. And there's nothing wrong with either version. Watch either version. They both tell the same story differently. I want to see this fight. I think this is like the greatest, well, number one, Godzilla Resurgence is the greatest Pokemon Evangelion fanfic ever written. But I want to see this fight because I loved the 2014 Godzilla. I even liked King of the Monsters. I didn't need that much Tywin Lannister in it. It doesn't need a plot. All it needs is Godzilla beating stuff up for 90 minutes. But I enjoyed it. Likewise, Shin Gojira is weird. I think it's a criticism of Japanese business administration, but I'm not sure because it's Hideaki Anno. So of course he obliterates Tokyo in the scariest way possible. Also, Shinkansen projectile. But at least it's not this.
He shoots lasers out of his doors.
I know.
Godzilla, huh? Okay, let me see what you're made of.
Take a look at who it is. For everyone who wanted to see this fight's been around for 16 years.
I knew that tuna head wasn't up to much. Next.
So for those of you that aren't familiar, that is from Godzilla Final Wars that came out in 2004. It was the last of the Toho Godzilla movies, and that particular scene is called Pretender to the Throne. It is the shortest chapter on the DVD with music by Sum 41. And I absolutely love everything about that clip. And then I have a friend of mine who is a huge fan of the Godzilla animated series, which actually took the 98 Godzilla and did something decent with it, until I pointed out that the Zilla that got destroyed was the one from the animated series. So I ruined his not quite childhood. So let's look at some originals. We've looked at Japan's love of visual media, and it's undeniable that Japan not only loves visual media, but they love improving upon it, and they've been doing it for as long as they've had access. As long as they can do something with art, they do it. We've looked at what can even be described as an anime, and we see that the waters are incredibly murky, and because they're murky, it's hard to define. We've seen inspirations, where there are moments that anime has been influenced by Western creators, but where Western creators have used their love of anime to craft things. And we have looked at outright adaptations. Now we're gonna look at originals, things that when people start talking about American anime, an actual attempt to make American anime, we can value adjust for it. So the four that are on this screen are the four I'm not gonna talk about. No offense to Samurai Jack fans, I have not seen an episode of that show. I will not comment on it. Afro Samurai is just another way for Samuel L. Jackson to say the MF word. Powerpuff Girls has an anime that no one should watch. And everyone says, but what about Ruby? How come you don't talk about Ruby? And this is my impression of Ruby. I tried to watch it. I tried to like it. I hated it. And if I am told that I have to watch like multiple hours of something before it gets good, my answer is no. That is also why I don't listen to Welcome to Night Vale. I don't care if it gets good around episode 26. I have to pay attention to 26 episodes? No. So I will not talk about these. What I will talk about are some things some of you might remember and some of you probably want to forget. So let's just get started with this. Does anyone here remember Exo Squad? No. So if you raised your hand for Exo Squad, you probably were born before 1985. Only because Exo Squad was an attempt to create Gundam for America. At a time when a lot of American cartoons were just 30-minute toy commercials, thanks Jen for that one, were just 30-minute toy commercials, the creators of Exo Squad, who were fans of Gundam, who were fans of Yamato, who were fans of Gatchaman, were trying to tell a serialized mecha story. But they didn't have a good budget, they didn't have good writers, they didn't have a good art department, and they never drew enough of an audience to get one. Because of that, this show languished and died after 3 seasons, getting just enough to be syndicated and ultimately sold and then completely forgotten about. Most people today would look at Exo Squad and say, this is some weird garbage, but at the time, it was something that had never been done before. No one had tried to do an overarching serial for essentially a kid's cartoon. And Try or fail, at least it was an attempt. So if you can track down Exo Squad, I recommend just taking a look at what could have been. Now, I remember when Aeon Flux came out. I remember Aeon Flux being like this big thing that everyone in my school was talking about this assassin who dies in every episode, and the art is so edgy. And then one day I found a copy of Aeon Flux in the anime section at Barnes & Noble, and I picked it up and I looked at it, flipped it over, and realized, this isn't anime. Not even a little. The design was inspired by heavy metal, the movie, not the music genre. It was put out by MTV at a time when anime had not yet reached any kind of cultural saturation. Were the creators anime fans? Who the hell knows? But it was different enough than what was on at the time that you could potentially see it as anime. You know what also was? The Spawn show on HBO. Guess what? That wasn't anime either. But today, if you go find a video store, you'll see them in the anime section. Not the first time, not the last, but you can see how that kind of edgy, dark storytelling, someone would look at that, say, "Kore wa anime desu ka?" Anime, boom, and then just throw it out to get more people interested in it. This is where I think American anime begins. So, an argument can be made for Batman the Animated Series. An argument can be made for Superman. But the reason I point that American anime, at least for me, starts with Batman Beyond is twofold. Number one, the entire animation team and character designers were in fact Japanese. When they were working on the pilot, they brought over a guy from Japan, a guy named Asano, and they had him do the storyboards, character designs, and the progression. Asano got his start in the animation industry in the 70s, working for Hayao Miyazaki and Isao Takahata. So dude had a pedigree. And he brought over a lot of the animation techniques that were being used in Japan. It was also animated by one of the Korean animation studios that was working on Japanese anime at the time. So just in terms of who's making it, who's plotting it, you have a Japanese connection. That is not something you had with Batman, which owed way more to pulp than it owed to anything else. It's not something you had with Superman, even though it was getting close. Batman Beyond is where I say it got its start. People started to see Japanese-style characters, the 90s facial designs, the Japanese graphics on the sides of buildings, and this was something different. If you haven't seen it, I highly recommend you take a look. It is 3 seasons. It is phenomenal. Then when you're done, watch X-Men Evolution and see how to do it wrong. So, The Matrix comes out. About a year or two after The Matrix comes out, they put out a Blu-ray called The Animatrix. Now, when The Animatrix came out, it was pretty much just a tech demo for Final Flight of the Osiris, something you had to watch if you wanted Matrix Revolutions to make any sense. But tucked away on that DVD, after the tech demo, was a little thing called The Robot Crusade, a 2-part animated short that shows how the robots came to power. That was done by a Japanese anime studio. Down in there, you have the scene of this guy running and breaking out of the Matrix through sheer exceptionalism. That was an anime studio. Studio Bones, Studio Madhouse, I think Stu Production IG, all of them worked on this. Before they became household names in the anime fandom, before they became what they are today, the Wachowskis said, "You want to contribute?" And they said, "Sure." And they got a market that went global because the Matrix, we see the Matrix now as a laughing stock. I don't know how many of you, well, I know how many of you. Some of you won't remember that when this came out, this was not just a big freaking deal. This redefined pop culture for about 2 years. So while we laugh at it now, it was major when it came out. And it changed the landscape in ways that you can't begin to understand. And again, a lot of people came to anime through The Matrix. A lot of people came to anime through the Animatrix. You can totally still find this. Just buy the Matrix 4-pack, throw out the last 2 movies, and you're good. So anime is now popular, and people are seeing it's edgy and from the future and has martial arts and eye lasers and stuff. So Warner Brothers says, why don't we make our own thing that will key into this anime crowd? And they create Lunatics Unleashed, which is essentially their attempt at anime. I really don't know. I don't know what this is. I watched it and I'm like, so what are we going for here? Sci-fi Looney Tunes, because we have Marvin the Martian. Are we going for violent Looney Tunes, because we have Yosemite Sam? Are we trying to redesign Bugs Bunny, because that sucks? How about just no? And after 13 episodes, the entire world said no, and no one remembers this, thank God. Until I dredged it up just now to point out that no, it doesn't always work. When it does work, you get a landmark series like Batman Beyond. When it doesn't work, you get a regret. So of course that leads to the point that everyone brings up with me. When are you going to talk about this? And I remember when Avatar came out, I opened up my TV Guide and I'm looking through TV Guide that fateful week and I see a picture of Aang in TV Guide and I'm like, so what's this anime? Avatar The Last Airbender. Oh, it's not an anime? It's done by 2 Canadians. And I threw the thing down and I didn't actually watch this until 2013. I didn't watch it till 2013. The only reason I did watch it is because I go to Colossal Con and in the staff suite at Colossal Con, they just play Avatar and Korra for the whole weekend. And I'm sitting down and I'm watching Avatar and I'm going, I kind of like this. I go back home, grab my friend's DVDs, I watch it and I'm like, I really like this. But there's a few things. One, Avatar is one of those early examples of showing love to one's source material. It does show love to martial arts, it shows love to the art styles, it shows love to the storytelling, it shows love to the character development. In many respects, it is probably the first moment when all of the beats aligned. Even though I love Batman Beyond, the beats were still Western style comic books. The beats aligned in a way where it felt like an anime. Now here's the thing, not an anime, Chinese opera. It is a 3-act Chinese opera. Korra is the anime. And I love Korra. Korra gave me Zahir, who is the scariest villain that I have ever seen in a child program. And not just because Henry Rollins is the voice of him. But Korra is the anime that has the design, the technology, the speculation, the characters, the jumping around, the rampant shifts in tone. That's the anime. This is a 3-act Chinese opera. But the thing is, it doesn't matter. Because it opened up so many people to the medium again that by the time Avatar came out, there was no turning back. You knew what you were getting into, the world knew what it was getting into, and the world was happy about it. But I always like to point out that this was Canadian, Polish, and German. And it was able to take those beats flawlessly. So of course, the other show that people bring up is Teen Titans. Because Teen Titans came out, and people are like, but that's an anime too. Look at those characters. Look at the chibi. Yes, I did look at the chibi and I hated it. I hated it so much that they made a whole series about it. But that therein is, again, it's not anime. They're just looking at something like Super Deformed. Oh, Super Deformed is in all these Japanese things, so let's just throw it down on there.
Yeah, but you gotta nuke that from fire, man.
I will nuke this from orbit with a railgun. So I see the people in the back know who Kappa Mikey is. So remember how MTV did Aeon Flux? In 2006, they tried to do an anime. Like, legit, they brought in legit people to make an anime. Didn't work. Was it fun? Yeah. Did it work? No. But it's still a thing. Let's have some fun with it. So, again, I've got like 10 minutes left. Over time, you start to see things change. Say hello to Baymax. Hi, Baymax. Is that the Baymax you're thinking of? No, you're thinking of that Baymax. And Big Hero 6 is one of those great examples of taking something that already existed, folding it into something anime, and making it work. What I loved about the Marvel Disney Big Hero 6 is that it took the beats, it took the designs, it took the pop culture, fused it together, rewrote the story, gave us something that was essentially multinational. In fact, the main character is half Japanese, half American, which carries its own major connotations, especially in Japan. But it brought this together for something for a new generation. That's why I call this adaptational kawaii. It is very different than its source material, but you don't care because wonderful things are happening. And because those wonderful things are happening, you get to see the world grow. So there's 3 things I say about Neo Yokio. When it came out, I went into my basement, I turned on Netflix, sat down with the girlfriend, and we watched it. And we flipped off the TV after the first episode. And we flipped off the TV after the second episode. And we flipped off the TV after the third episode. We watched all 6, went upstairs, got 2 more beers, went downstairs, and watched the whole series again. The best way of describing Neo Yokio, I mean, I've read articles that talk about it being a hollow imitation. It doesn't claim to be anime, despite the fact that they tote its anime pedigree around. It doesn't claim to be anything other than like an homage, and it's a bad homage. The best way of explaining Neo Yokio comes courtesy of one of the greatest anime writers, pop culture writers ever, Mr. Mike Toole. When he wrote in his review for Anime News Network, Neo Yokio is proof that you can animate Jaden Smith's Twitter feed. And that is amazing. The very fact you can do that, that is something you can see. So, who here saw this? I cannot tell you the number of times I have watched the Storming the Castle episode. Yes. Just with bloody tears playing in the background, watching everyone die. I loved Castlevania so much. I love how when I go online it says, if you like anime, you'll like Castlevania. And that really works because this is not an anime. It was written by Warren Ellis, who is an American comics writer. It was animated in Germany and France. There is nothing anime about this except maybe the character designs, but no Japanese involvement. Castlevania isn't even Japanese. It's Konami ripping off Universal movies. And yet it's in the anime section. And that's telling. Because it looks like anime, it feels like anime, it's based on something Japanese, it's an anime. And this is gonna keep happening. Time and time again, this is gonna keep happening. Simply because, one, marketing term, and two, anime has now become something connotative. It's something you feel, not something you define. And because it feels like it, they're gonna put it in there and you're gonna find it next to all these other anime, despite the fact that it is a Western creation. So this leads to the question, what does Japan think? Have any Japanese directors or creators commented on anime? And yes, one has. Back in like 2003, 2004, Dai Sato, who is a storyboard artist and a director and a creator, was sitting down talking about anime at the Japan Society, and they asked him what he thought about American anime. And without skipping a beat, he answered, the Boondocks. Now, number one, labor of love, because Aaron Magruder loves blaxploitation films, 70s kung fu movies, and anime. It is using Korean animators and Japanese storyboard artists. He is deliberately crafting something that is all of his loves put together into one thing. That's the Boondocks. The Japanese love this show. They still do. I have seen the statues in Akiba. They will not sell them to you. This is one of those watershed moments where everything clicked and came together. So when someone says, is there such thing as American anime? Boom, right there. So right before we close, I just want to give you a quick little microcosm of all of this through Batman. Because Batman is a clear case study of both sides having fun with it. In the late 60s, a Japanese comics creator is going back to Japan from the United States. He's sitting in LAX. He picks up a Batman comic, wants to know what this Batman thing is, flips through the comic and says, I love this. He goes home and hands it to Jiro Kuwata, who is a mangaka known for creating Itoman, the first cyborg hero, and says, make this comic. Kuwata looks at it, says, I can work on this. And he goes and creates his own version of Batman. So what version of Batman are we gonna get? The Caped Crusader, the Dark Knight? No, we get Adam West. Where he fights a guy named Lord Deathman, who came back to life using yoga tricks. But Batman defeated him through the strength of righteousness. I'm not making this up. I have the t-shirt from Hot Topic. So this was the thing in the 60s. It goes away. Like 2000 or 2005, Chip Kid goes to Japan, finds a bunch of Batman comics at a mandarake, looks for as many of them as he can get, researches Japanese Batman history, puts together the book Bat Manga. It is published, and the world is introduced to this. It does very well in sales, so DC Comics goes back to Japan to buy their own stolen property and releases the Jiro Kuwata Bat Manga in like 2014, 2015. 3 volumes of as many of the comics as they could find, showing you that even Batman is cooler in Japan. Meanwhile, Bruce Wayne gets amnesia and a giant robot in the 90s, because everyone did. And let's never forget that piece of gloriousness right there, which I got for $2.99 on Black Friday. I don't care. So, if you guys are interested in anything else, I have literally a few copies of the lecture notes here. If you'd like to get a copy, $5 pays for my weekend. Otherwise, my final panel is tomorrow at Sunday. It's Friday. Sunday at 1 in the afternoon. I'm doing Punk Rock 2. When punk popped, where I'm going to talk about punk rock from the 90s to today. If you want to hear me go wax poetic more about music, that's the one. If you'd like to grab books, I'm here for another 5 minutes. Otherwise, I hope you were entertained, and I hope you got some things enlightened out of it. Thank you for coming. I didn't think there was going to be this many people.